a manual data transfer as it stands today, an export in Trimble Access Monitoring when you go to data exchange, T4D, and then you export your rounds, and you use the data to import it to T4D. And I will show you the different options in T4D, what you can do there, what are the import options basically. Before I do so, just to be a bit more precise on Trimble 4D control. So as probably a lot of you know already, I'm quite sure about that. So T4D consists of two components. On the one hand side, you have T4D server, which is the back end, right, where you do all your configuration, where you connect to your sensors, where you specify your processing settings, etc. Also where you configure your storage settings. So that's all done in the back end. And once this is done, data flows into T4D Web. And there you would do your visualization, reporting, data sharing, etc. And yeah, so this also applies to T4D Access, right? So it's not just T4D Advanced. So you would still import your job XML files from Trimble Access Monitoring into T4D Server. And once the data is there and processed, you can then add it to T4D Web. So from a workflow perspective, before I jump into the demo itself, let me just show you a couple of slides here, some upfront information. So this is a screenshot of T4D Server, of the so-called terrestrial engine PP, where you can import files either manually or you can scan a folder. I will show you the manual way how you can import them and how you can process them. So that's the very first step. You open T4D Server. Of course, you need a T4D Access license, and then you can import your data. And as a next step, or in the next step, you open T4D Web, the web application, and in here you can add a sensor. It's very similar. It's exactly the same way as you may know it from T4D Advanced. So you add a sensor. And when you go to add sensor, of course, you will only find certain sensor types that make sense in terms of T4D Access. Once the sensors are added, you can look at the charts, and you can basically do whatever you want with the data. You can look at the scatter plot, etc. And that's something I would like to show you. Now. So what you see here, this is the user interface of T4D Server, and in the background you also see the web application that I've already opened, right? So again, let me start with T4D Server. So in T4D Server, the first thing, or well, before I start with the workflow, maybe for those of you who are not familiar with T4D, just some words how this is put together here. So basically, on the left side, you have a tree view, right? You insert certain modules, is it called in the T4D terminology, and each module has a dedicated task, right? So basically, the terrestrial engine PP, which I'm going to insert in a second, is responsible for the processing and for calculating some approximate coordinates, for example. Then here on the properties window, you will see the properties for each of the different modules. And here we will have some, like a 2D map view, for example. Here some status messages that typically helps if something goes wrong, if you want to get an update or just some information, like at the moment database is clean, for example. That's maybe something else I should mention. So T4D is based on a Microsoft SQL database, and that also applies to T4D Access. So there is still a Microsoft SQL database installed, and T4D comes on top. Other than that, here at the bottom, you see I have a valid license, of course, and yeah. So I think that's how the UI looks like in a nutshell. So let me go ahead, and you can insert modules by doing a right click. And here you see already it's a very stripped down list of available modules. And that's exactly because what I said, we have removed functionality and only left things in this list which really make sense for T4D Access. So the first one, the alarm manager, I will not insert it now. So this is for example, where you can where you can alarm if, for example, a point in a job XML file is not available or has not been measured. So that's something you can specify here. The disk watch module is something where you can watch your local directory. So if it increases a certain size, you can delete the data. I do not expect that we actually need it because a job XML file is not that big, right? So I do not expect that a hard drive runs full because of the JXL files. But still, I mean, the functionality is there if you need to use it. The monitoring DB service module is basically responsible to, let's say, transfer the data from T4D server over to T4D web. And the most important module for this demonstration, at least, and also for T4D Access, is the terrestrial engine TP. So let me insert this one. Maybe I will just call it, I don't know, workshop. And in the next step, you see there are some settings I can specify. So first of all, the method of file import. So there are two options, manually and scan folder. And maybe let me explain what that means. So if you set it to manually, you can then, I will maybe just finish it, insert it. So if you set it to manually, you can do a right click then on the terrestrial engine TP and say process file. And then a window opens up where you can select your job XML file that you have previously exported from Trimble Access, right? Before I do so, maybe let me go back again to the properties. So here you see these are the properties of the terrestrial engine TP. I could switch this to scan folder. And if I switch to scan folder, I can select a certain directory, either on my local hard drive, for example, or basically any directory to which I have access to. And so this means, depending on the scan interval I set here, the minimum is 5 minutes, maximum is 24 hours. So this should typically match your scheduler settings on Trimble Access Monitoring, or at least the frequency on how often you upload the files to the directory specified. Again, so typically in an automated monitoring environment, it would be half an hour. I'm not sure if that's really the frequency you need for T4D Access. So probably it would be sufficient if you select 24 hours, because you would probably not go more often to the field than once a day if you use T4D Access, right? But just want to mention it. So it depends on the scan interval how often you get an update here. So I would like to show you now the manual workflow. That's why I select manually here. And I process the files which I have available. So I will just select here this file, this job XML file, and maybe some more information on that. So that T4D is able to process this file, or yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is realized at the moment. You have basically one job XML file per epoch per round measurement. So in that case, I have 6 round measurements here, and you also see in this folder structure already that you have not just the job XML files, but you also have a folder above, right? So for round station 2, the JXL, you also have a folder that is associated with this job XML file, and in this folder above, in these folders, there are the images of the SX instrument. Because, I mean, that's also another big benefit of T4D Access in combination with SX instruments. It's not about observations only. So you can import observations plus the images that you have taken with the SX instrument before using Trimble Access Monitoring, right? But the only thing you need to do in T4D is you need to select the job XML file. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I select this one here, and then I say open, and that's it, right? So you see there is now a status update. It says the processing has been started, and now we got data in. So these are the the list of points, we have altogether 3 backside points and 4 foresight points, BS1 to BS3, MP1 to MP4. All of them are measured in 2 phases, of course. T4D requires 2-phase measurements. And so the first job XML file, the first file you import, is automatically the reference. You can still change this afterwards. You cannot change it in T4D server. You would do that in T4D web, where you can change the reference date, and you can pick any other epoch, for example, to be your reference. So basically what you can see here, you have the horizontal angle, vertical angle, you have the distances, you also have the standard deviations, and as I said, phase 1, phase 2, and the measurement type, right? At the moment, we only have 1 file imported, and it also shows you the number of rounds. So it's 1 round, as I said, 1 JXL, one round. And also the number of targets which are in this job XML file, and 3 backside points plus 4 foresight points, 7. So number of targets in total is 7. And you also see the start time and the end time, right? So this was measured late afternoon yesterday, US time, but local time it was shortly after midnight. So the round took 2 minutes, roughly 2 minutes, 35 seconds. And I think, so in T4D web, the timestamp will be associated with the end time later on, right, of a round measurement. All right. Yeah, reference measurement. So this is stored. This is exactly the same now as here because I only imported 1 file. And you have some total station data like the refraction coefficient, instrument, firmware, hardware, for example. Right. So what I will do next is I will just upload another job XML file just to have something more meaningful. Well, maybe I will just do another one right away. So number 3 and number 4. And down here again, you see that this is processed. Processing has been started. And if I now look again at my file import history, I suddenly see 3 rounds. Of course, I have the same number of targets, or I mean, it should be the same number of targets ideally, right? And you see that I think it was the idle mode that has been selected in T4D Trimble Access Monitoring because there are just some subsequent round measurements. So that means as soon as this one stopped here, the next one was measured. And yeah, so this is how it works. So again, the terrestrial engine PP computes approximate coordinates which are required for the adjustment. Because if I look now at the adjustment results, which is done by the so-called integrity monitor, you see a 2D map view. This is pretty much the same as in TBC, right? So you also see your 3 backside points and you see your foresight points. And also here there are different tabs. So if I go to current displacement, for example, why don't I make this bigger actually? Okay. So current displacements. Here you see the backside points. There is no displacement, of course, 0, because they are regarded as fixed points, and the same applies to the standard deviation. By default, we show the 3 sigma values here for all different components and also for 2D and 3D. Well, there is not much movement for the foresight points either, but you see, at least we see some results for the standard deviation. I mean, in reality, this would look a little bit different, right? But due to the office setup, I think that's okay. In terms of the adjustment, on the next step here, you also get some indication on the quality of the adjustment. So theoretically, as closer it gets to 1, the better it is, right? At the moment, it's 3.2. It's not bad. I've already seen adjustments. They show the standard error of unit weight of 35 or something. So that's something I would consider as bad, but that's okay. That's actually good. And yeah, displacement charts doesn't really make much sense here because you would look at the displacement charts in T4D web. Anyhow, I can maybe just go back 12 hours because, well, maybe it's a bit more in the meanwhile. meanwhile 24 hours. So here you see, this is what I have already processed. I need to go back in time again because the files are from yesterday evening US time and midnight my local time here. All right, so again, I have imported now 3 or 4 rounds. I will do, let me check again, round 4, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I will just import some more. I think I have, yeah, 5, 6, 7. So it gets a bit more meaningful. T4D web later on, 6 and 7, right? So see the list here increases. And if I go back to the status here, so 106, so that looks good. So that's the 7th round basically. And if I look at the integrity monitor, so here we have some movement. MP2 is one of the foresight points, and this foresight point has moved by 11 centimeters in the northing direction. Also, the others have slightly moved, right? 10 centimeters. That was good because now we exceeded the alert threshold, which you can configure here. At the moment, it is set to 7 centimeters in the northing and easting direction, and as it was moved by 11 centimeters, of course, it turns into red. If it would have only been like 6 centimeters, then it would be yellow because that's in between warning and alert. So that's how it works here, right? Maybe just another comment. So the fixed points here, they are selected automatically, backside 1, 2, and 3. So this is nothing I needed to specify. This is basically specified in the job XML file that I have imported. So that was really the only thing I did. I imported the job XML file. And the last comment on this one, maybe, it is also important that you choose or that you select the right coordinate system. In my example, it's a local coordinate system because on the Trimble Access Monitoring side, also a local coordinate system was used. But if you use a grid coordinate system in Trimble Access Monitoring, of course, you must select the appropriate coordinate system also in T4D Access, right? Okay, with that, I would jump to T4D Web. So T4D Web, in my case, it's also it's installed locally on my machine, so that's why the URL is in my browser localhost T4D Web. So if I sign in, this is a new system, right? I have just installed it, so there's nothing available yet. It's an installation of T4D Access, and this is how it looks like in the beginning. So the first thing you would do in T4D Web is you would create a project. And to create a project, you enter the project management, which is opening up automatically on a separate tab. So in here, you can either say projects here and then get to this one, or yeah, I will just click on add project here. And I will also call it maybe same as earlier. I call it workshop, and the time zone is okay. Unit preferences you can specify, like for the distance meter, right? So all of this is fine with me. And then I say save. So now I have created a new project, and in the next step, what I can do is I can now add the sensors that are available in T4D server. I can add them to my project. You can already see here that you can add as many projects as you want. So for example, I can add workshop 2, and I can add, okay, workshop 22. So I can add as many projects as I want, right, in T4D Web. The data source is still the same, right? I would still use T4D server, but I can really decide when I now add a sensor. I can decide into which T4D Web project my sensor data should flow. So in my example, I will use the workshop project and not the other one. But the reason why you can add multiple projects here is is because some customers, they create a web project in the beginning when they set up their system, for example, just to play around to understand how it works. So a lot of customers have just a dummy or a demo web project. Others create maybe another project which is specific for certain data, like for certain geotech data only, for example, or some others create projects because they want to share it with certain people, although there are also other ways in T4D Web, which I can show you in a minute. But those are the reasons. I just want to highlight, so there is no limitation. You can add as many projects as you want. So at the moment, this one is selected. So that's my active project workshop. You also see it up here. And then I just go to, in my case, I go to add multiple sensors because I would like to add multiple sensors at the same time. I do not want to add one by one. So in that case, the only sensor type that is available is target displacement, because it's really the only one that makes sense in terms of T4D access. And my data I get from the so-called terrestrial NGMPT and the integrity monitor that I was showing earlier, right? So this is why this one is already selected here. And I could enable precision alignment as well. If I do so, I can basically associate and tie a certain positional sensor, my prisms, to an alignment file, right? And then the displacement and the report information, everything will then be relative to delta, station, offset, vertical. In my case, I think I will focus on the basic stuff for now, because considering the time, and I do not have, let's say, a proper TXL file or something available at the moment anyhow. So let me just go through the general workflow. So you select sensor type target displacement, and as the data source, I select my integrity monitor workshop. Then I go to next, and here you see this is exactly the same list as you saw earlier. So this is the backside points and the foresight points. I can even change their name here if I wanted to, so they are visualized differently in this T4D web project. And what is very important, and what you should do in this case, you would like to import the history, because only if you select import history, the 6 or 7 rounds I uploaded earlier will also be imported automatically. Otherwise, if you just add the sensors, you would need to process another job XML file, and only as of then you will see results in your time series. So I enable import history, and if I go to next, you can specify an axis rotation. Axis rotation is something very similar to alignment report, which means in that case you can specify a certain rotation angle per prism. So you could specify a bearing between 2 points so that the displacement information is tilted by that angle, or you can just type in a manual angle, just some angle, so which is typically helpful if you have, I don't know, a prism on a dam wall, for example, similar to alignments where you want to monitor perpendicular to that wall. But since we have alignment support, customers typically use the alignment approach instead of axis rotation. It's just easier because it applies automatically to all of your prisms, right? All right, so in the end, we have summary. We want to add 7 sensors, and then I can save this one. You see now everything is imported. There's a progress bar up here. Backfill is still in progress at the moment. It takes a couple of seconds until this is done. I mean, in that case, it's not a lot of data, right? We have just 5 or 6 round measurements, but still it indicates that this is still in progress. And what else is indicated here? You also see this triangle, and this triangle means that these 3 points are backside points. They are backside points in terms of the geodetic processing, right? So they are already added now to my project workshop. And if I now go back to to this one here, I must do a refresh, of course. So you see now I have a project workshop. That's why you see all functionality that is basically available in T4D Web. And so let me go to the charts page just to be sure that everything is there. So here you see all the sensors are listed. And if I now go to MP1, which is the foresight point 1, you see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are the epoch results of the 6 rounds I uploaded earlier. If you look at the scale here, very, very small displacements. We are talking about 1 millimeter displacements here, or yeah, it's 1 millimeter. So it looks more than it actually is in reality. Of course, you can also change the scaling of your axis. And there are a lot of other different functionalities. You can, for example, change the date range if you think about a longer period for which you have data. You can also export this information to a CSV or XLSX. So that's all possible from here. And what you can also do is, if you only want to look at the height information, you can disable this one. So maybe let's have a look at MP2. I think this was the one that has movement by 11 centimeters, right? So let me check on this one. Yeah, and you see here. So now we have. It looks very similar, but in fact it's quite different because here we have a different scale. We have 12 centimeters offset in actually not in the height. So it was a horizontal movement of 12 centimeters. And yeah, that's nicely represented here, right? So you see data is flowing, and basically if you now go back to T4D in a week or so because you went to the field with Trimble Access Monitoring, and then you import another job XML file, you would just add another epoch or maybe multiple epochs. It depends on how many rounds you measure at that time. All right, so what else you can do? I mentioned earlier, pretty much all of the functionality of T4D Web is available. So for those of you who don't know T4D, T4D Advanced does not really look much different in terms of T4D Web. So if I look at the scatter plot basically means it is you can think of it's a top-down view on certain sensors. Like in my example, I'm looking at the delta north and delta east for MP1, and you can also see here different displacements, right? I can change the date range easily by moving the slider here. I can move left and right, so I can really look at the data I would like to see. And here I can select the component, so very convenient. Right. Yeah, you can change the color by displacement. That's what you see here. So for example, if the displacement is higher, then it's in red. If it's 0, like in this case, it's green, right? So things like that. Also from here, you can export the data to a CSV, for example. What else can you do? So if I go to analysis, this is a really powerful functionality, especially for automated monitoring, I must say, because there you can combine different sensor types. But even for semi-automated monitoring, this can be useful, because if you think about, for example, you want to look at all your charts of all the sensors in a certain direction, in a certain component. So I could, for example, do a multi-sensor selection. I select all of my 7 sensors, and then I can say, okay, I'm only interested in the height component, for example, or maybe let's choose easting because of the movement of the second point. And I say done, and then I can view it, and then you immediately see, well, immediately if you zoom in, hang on, let me reset it. You see, there are the points again. So I have the easting component for all of my 7 points, and this one here should be MP2. Yeah, that's correct. So you see, if I disable everything here, yeah, this one remains. So this is the offset here. Right. So you see, there's also some benefits of using analysis even for semi-automated monitoring only. And then the other thing I would like to highlight here is a new feature which is part of T4D version 6.3. So it's called visual inspection, and this makes use of the images of the FX instrument, right? So if I go here, this is how it looks like. So I hope, yeah, I have some pictures. Maybe I select another one here. So you see, I have again my 7 timestamps at the bottom. So that the beauty here is, and the nice thing is, you can really look at your images associated with your time series. So at the bottom there is the time series, and up here you have your images, and you can also select other timestamps. And the nice thing is, you can see some variation in your pictures. Like in this example, just this guy here, he tilted his head, for example, and the same applies to a prism, for example. So also down here, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to zoom in because I only have 6 epochs or so. What you can do here is you can also change the comparison mode. For example, you can switch to a slider view. So in that case, let's have a look again. You see that? All right. Or the third one is the fade mode. So in that case, you have just 2 pictures that are on top of each other, and depends. Now you even see how it moves, right? All right. No, that's visual inspection, and again, you can move around. You also have a tooltip where you see the displacement here, and of course, you can do exactly the same for all the other prisms. I must say, for all the other prisms for which you have images available. And again, the images are stored in the folder which is associated to the job XML file. So you only import the job XML file, and as soon as you imported the job XML file, we automatically reference to the folder in which the images are stored of the appropriate round.